Thanks for joining me. I'm digital artist Aaron Rutten, and in this video, I'll talk about art theft and the latest technology you can use to protect your work. As you might know, artists often face challenges in preventing the unauthorized use of their artwork. For a while, we used watermarks to protect our images, but eventually Photoshop was able to remove them with little effort. Now that AI bots are scraping the internet to steal artwork to train image generators, things have gotten much worse. For the record, I am not anti-artificial intelligence. There are pros and cons to everything. For example, when AI bots scrape images they don't have the rights to in order to create a commercial product, that is definitely wrong. But on the other hand, there are AI image generators that only use ethically sourced images from artists who gave their permission to use said images. By using image generators that are trained on ethically sourced data, artists can create an almost unlimited collection of reference images without infringing on anyone else's copyright. I'm going to call out most artists here. You've stolen images at one point or another through image search. By stolen, I mean you used a reference image to aid in creating your work without that photographer's permission. And while this is somewhat a gray area legally, it's just as unfair as the AI bots harvesting your work without compensating you or giving you proper attribution. The difference is that when artists steal art, they sometimes copy it exactly. AI image generators only regurgitate random bits of images, so you can't really attribute the generated images to any one artist. The likelihood of your personal art style being turned into an image generator theme is highly unlikely. If you're incredibly famous, have been dead for 100 years, and are known around the world, then maybe your style will get stolen. But otherwise, you or I won't experience a significant financial impact from image scraping. Whether there's a psychological or emotional impact, well, that's a different story. Regardless of whether it's humans or robots stealing our work, many artists want the peace of mind that if their work is somehow used, they at least get credit. This is where Wacom's Yuify technology comes in. It allows artists, photographers, and designers to digitally encode their images with an invisible, tamper-proof signature. The record of each image and who created it are stored permanently in the blockchain, which is a decentralized network of computers. Just to be clear, this has nothing to do with NFTs, and Wacom assures us that the service is not energy intensive. Yuify's micromark signature is said to remain intact even after an image has been altered. Could this mean that using Yuify would allow an artist to identify their work in images created by an image generator? Unfortunately, I cannot test that. But I will demonstrate altering a signed image in Photoshop later in this video, and we can at least see how it performs in that regard. While Yuify does not claim to make your artwork AI-proof, it does offer to help protect your art from misuse by other humans. For example, if someone downloaded your work and then used it to sell as posters online, you could utilize Yuify to claim ownership. Although whether or not you have the resources to stop the image from being used is a different subject, but I'll come back to that. If someone downloaded your Yuified work and posted it as their own, viewers could easily identify that someone else made that image, and they would know exactly who the true artist is. If you're creating commissions or design work for a client and you're worried they will steal your work and not pay you, Yuify could potentially be used to protect your property. Not everyone wants to steal art. Many people are happy to give attribution or pay to license an image for commercial use. Yuify can facilitate this as well. Artists can specify the license for each image, and Yuify can create legally binding contracts to connect artists with people who want to use their work legally. It's even possible that Yuify's licensing feature could enable artists to sell their own stock images without having to rely on a third-party website, which takes a hefty cut of their revenue. Another use case is to help fans who have discovered an artist's work but don't know who made it. Personally, I don't like to sign my work. It's a visual distraction. Digital signatures are invisible. Therefore, if someone came across my work and wanted to know who made it, a Yuify attribution could make that possible without interfering with the presentation of the artwork. These signatures can also function as proof of authenticity, adding value to digital artwork and giving collectors the assurance that the work they are purchasing is genuine. And in a world that is increasingly becoming awash in AI-generated content, A Yuify attribution is proof that your art was human-made or handmade. So now that you know what Yuify can do, let's take a look at how to set it up and use it. To get started, you will need to create an account if you do not already have a Wacom ID. I have registered Wacom products in the past, so I already have an account. Though the Yuify website URL is different, I was able to use the login I created for Wacom.com. After successfully creating an account, fill in the essential information about yourself. All you need to provide is a name and email to use Yuify to sign images. If you plan to use the licensing feature, you'll need to add your address as well. This ensures the contracts you provide are legally binding. You can add or update this information later if you like. Next, you will need to connect Yuify to the applications you want to export from. As of the recording of this video in 2024, only Photoshop, Rebelle, and Clip Studio Paint are supported. But more applications may be supported in the future. Rebelle and Clip Studio Paint are easy to set up. Just select Connect to Yuify in the File menu, and it should take you to a login page where you can link your software to the Yuify app. Initially, I had some trouble getting this connection to work, but I tried again later and it was successful. Internet access is required to sign your images with Yuify if that wasn't clear already. Once Yuify has been connected to your software, you will be able to export images with a digital signature. At this point, the only supported formats for exporting are JPEG and PNG. Fortunately, these are the most common formats, but Wacom is working on supporting TIFF, GIF, PDF, and more. The images you are trying to sign need to meet some minimum criteria. For example, the smallest resolution accepted is 420 by 420 pixels in 8-bit color. Images must also be smaller than 12,000 by 12,000 pixels, but that limitation may be overcome at some point. Just as well, the image cannot already be registered in Yuify. Images cannot be re-registered either. The image also needs a minimum amount of visual variation. Monochrome images and images without a lot of color variety may not be compatible. But most importantly, the image must be accompanied by a sufficient amount of provenance or credentials. This means that you need to create the artwork in an application that supports Yuify so that it can track your edits. This adds more substance to your claim of ownership. Artwork that you created prior to the existence of Yuify is not currently compatible. This is disappointing because the artwork I am most interested in protecting and licensing was created before Yuify existed. However, I understand that if anyone could simply Yuify a pre-existing image that they didn't actually create, then it would defeat the purpose. For the record, I did try to fake credentials on a pre-existing work by making a bunch of invisible edits. It didn't work. I got really frustrated trying over and over again to sign a pre-existing image. Wacom's FAQ does not explicitly say that the images have to be brand new. Even tech support didn't seem to understand what I was asking, so hopefully this video makes that clear for you. Here's an example of a fresh painting I created in Rebelle using a version that supports Yuify. I had to literally start from scratch and paint this from beginning to end in order for it to be valid. I'll export it as a signed copy, and after a few moments, the image has been registered to my Yuify account. I get a download of the signed image that has the micromark signature embedded in it. You will want to download this image because, as far as I can tell, you don't get another opportunity to access the full-size version. This is the only version of your image you can share online if you want Yuify to work. That means I can't upload some other non-Yuified version of this painting. Ever. If I do, then that version, and therefore this work, would not be protected and cannot be licensed. While I had success signing digital art, other types of images may not be as easy. Because photography is all shot on a camera, unless you made substantial edits to it, I am not sure how strict Yuify is going to be about what you can sign. Just as well, I don't know if traditional artists are going to be able to sign work, considering all of the painting was done in the real world. There are Yuify categories for 3D art, but again, without the necessary credentials, how does one go about signing this type of work? Once you are able to successfully sign an image, you'll need to add it to a project in order for it to be listed on Yuify. This is basically more info you can attach to your image, such as the category and hardware and software used. I would also add what the pixel dimensions are in the description and what format the work is in, such as JPEG or PNG. When someone looks up your image, they can choose to view this additional information. You can edit this information at any time if you need to update it. Projects can also be deleted. However, I don't see a way to delete exported images, so be careful about what you sign with Yuify. One feature I would eventually want is a way to group your projects into folders. This isn't an issue now when I only have one image, but in the future I may have potentially hundreds of them. I'm sure by that point the problem will have been solved. You can at least filter and search to find specific works. This next step is optional, but you can license your images to others for commercial or non-commercial use. There is a lot you can do to customize the licensing terms for each work. A few common templates provide you with a starting point. Pricing work has always been challenging for me, so this is the most difficult part of using Yuify in my opinion. Wacom offers some starting prices to give you an idea of what the average person might charge. I've made this painting able to be licensed for $50. This is just an example I uploaded to try out Yuify, so I don't have the expectation that someone would license this. If I were licensing something I spent more time on that was more commercially viable, then I would set different pricing and licensing terms, so don't copy me here. You will want to take some time to really think about what to charge for your work, especially if you choose to make it available for commercial use. For example, someone could license this image and potentially make much more selling it as prints. I don't mind if my work is used as a small part of something that someone else profits from, but I don't want someone straight up selling my prints and making more than I do from it. This is why I made it only available for one use. I also restricted it from being used for product design. I could take it a step further and only upload a smaller version of my work to make it less desirable for printing. Under these terms, someone could use this painting for a website background, a YouTube video, or something like that, but not anything that gets mass-produced like posters. Making the time frame unlimited seems appropriate for this type of use because otherwise, when the term expires, the buyer has to remove the image or purchase a new license. Making your work free for non-commercial use might be a good way to get some exposure for your work, but that's really up to you. Don't stress too much about this because you can always delete the license and change the terms at any time. I would imagine that any licenses that are already in effect can't be revoked though. You can also add multiple licenses per image if you want to give buyers options or different pricing levels. It might go without saying, but I would avoid licensing anything that you don't own the copyright to. For example, I wouldn't try to license fan art since that could get you into some legal trouble. If you simply want to protect your work and not sell it, then you need not enable licensing. What is unclear to me is how payments are handled when a work is licensed. According to the licensing agreement I created, the fee is due within 10 days of receiving an accurate invoice from the licensor. Based on that, my guess is that I would get a notification through Yuify that someone wants to license an image. Then I'd need to collect the payment myself through something like PayPal, for example. I'd have to pay a fee for the transaction, so I'd be losing 3 to 10% depending on the circumstances of the currency exchanged. That's something to factor into my licensing fee. The licensing agreement does mention bank account, so you could avoid payment processing fees and ask for a wire transfer, but that's a lot to arrange on the client's end unless they have an accounting department. For my bank, a $25 fee is charged to send a domestic wire transfer, and an international transfer is $35. That's on top of the $50 I am asking for the license. I'd also want to consider the amount of work that goes into making payment arrangements with buyers and factor that into my price as well. Furthermore, the licensing agreement mentions taxes and governmental charges. Who is responsible for collecting these taxes? How much do we charge? How do sellers determine who is eligible to pay taxes? Who is responsible for remitting the tax to the proper authorities? This is extremely important because sellers could be penalized if they don't collect and remit taxes. So as you can see, what to charge is not a decision to be taken lightly. After receiving payment, I assume both parties would digitally sign the contract and the transaction would be complete. Wacom would then make the image available to the buyer as a download in the Yuify app. I also am not certain what happens if there is a dispute. Let's say a buyer wanted a refund. Wacom probably wouldn't get involved in that. If you had collected payment through PayPal, then it's possible PayPal might side with the buyer and you could lose your licensing fee. If that happened, would the license still be active? This is all really crucial stuff that I am unable to find an answer to. Just to be safe, I am going to add a refund policy to each image description that states all sales final, no refunds or exchanges. If there is a dispute, then at least I can provide this as evidence and that might help the ruling go in my favor. According to Wacom, they will be expanding on Yuify in the coming years. The core functionality will remain free, but that wording leads me to believe that there will eventually be features that you will need to subscribe to. Customer service, licensing enforcement, payment facilitation, and many other things I mentioned in this video would easily be worth paying someone else to handle if you're licensing a lot of images. Now that I have a signed image with a description and licensing terms, let's move on to test this image to see how Yuify holds up. The Yuifinder is a tool you can use to look up the credentials of an image. Simply drop a downloaded image into the Yuifinder, and if it has been registered, you will be presented with the title, owner, licensing options, and other information. Well, maybe. If I drop in the saved image I signed, it is recognized and it shows the correct information. That's pretty neat. If I crop some of the image and try it again, it appears to still recognize that this is mine. Great. Let's crop a little more. I guess that was too much because now the credentials are no longer recognized. How about if I do a basic hue shift in Photoshop? Nope, that was enough to wipe out the micromarking. While I do have a basic level of protection for my work, it's not without some flaws. I imagine this technology will improve over time, and I still think it's worth using. But I also think it's been a bit too hyped in terms of the micromarking being able to resist tampering. Needless to say, if a simple Photoshop filter can confuse the Yuifinder, then I highly doubt Yuify could recognize your work if pixels of it appeared in an AI-generated image. But you probably couldn't recognize them either. Here's an important consideration. What if someone Yuifys my work first before I can? Because the signing process is so strict, I don't know if that's really a concern. Perhaps someone could redraw your art and then sign it, or maybe they could take part of your work and incorporate it into an image they mostly made themselves. I don't know what the policy is around that, but there is a button to report images. I would imagine that the true artist would just need to provide proof of ownership like the layered artwork, and Wacom would be able to remove the incorrect attribution. But since I haven't tested this myself, I am just speculating. Again, this just shows how much information is missing about the Yuify service. Until this is addressed, I think artists will be slow to adopt the technology. So how do I feel about Yuify overall? My first impression was that it was sort of unclear exactly what Yuify was for. After seeing it had been incorporated into Rebel, I decided to give it a try. It took more work than I expected to figure out how to get it going, and I'm not exactly technologically challenged. It wasn't rocket science by any means, but I think the average person might get frustrated and give up without clearer instructions about the purpose of Yuify and its limitations. But that's why I made this video, to make Yuify easier to understand. Now that I have gotten over the initial frustration of getting an image accepted, I now better comprehend the purpose of Yuify, and I can see how it could be beneficial to my artistic endeavors. Personally, I think Yuify is worth trying, at least on artwork that is most vulnerable to theft or misuse. Going forward, I don't think it would hurt to get in the habit of exporting any images destined for the web through Yuify, since you get a JPEG or PNG anyway. Images you have added Yuify attribution to appear in your Yuify portfolio, so that will help with keeping track of which images are protected and which are not. Not being able to digitally sign my past work is definitely holding me back from using Yuify more. I think it should be more clear that this is a limitation, and there should be a process to address that. While I am willing to dip my toes in Yuify, I am wary of investing too much time and energy into building up a large portfolio. I'll sidetrack a bit here to explain why. I recently deleted my Zazzle account because they changed their terms and started taking money each month from my earnings for not being active enough. This pretty much makes it impossible for me to ever receive any of the money I earn on that website. Over nearly a decade, I had put hundreds of hours into processing my artwork for Zazzle, uploading it, adding descriptions and keywords, and creating products to sell. And now, years later, I have to toss all of that effort into the garbage. Even if I focused on Yuifying only my best work, that's still potentially a lot of images. So you really have to consider whether or not you actually have the proven capacity to sell licensed images before you try to dedicate too much time to setting that up. I didn't have a track record for selling tons of print-on-demand merchandise, so it wasn't worth it in the long run to put so much emphasis on my Zazzle store. However, in the short term, I did earn occasional revenue, which helped me through my starving artist phase, so it wasn't totally pointless. You also have to consider whether or not people are even seeing your work enough to steal it. Do you have past examples of people taking your work without permission? Do an image-based search on Google and you might be surprised. I've had at least a few dozen instances of theft that I am aware of, but I am sure my work gets stolen a fair amount. Given that I was able to make some basic changes to my work in Photoshop and the digital signature became useless, I don't think currently it is effective enough to protect from AI bots scraping my work and turning it into data for image generators. There's definitely potential for that, but we'll have to see what the future holds. Yuify's ability to deter humans from stealing my work is definitely promising. But again, if I don't know about stolen images and others don't report them, then Yuified artwork isn't going to do much to protect me. What might be more proactive is to offer a Yuifinder browser extension that overlays the author's name over registered images that appear in the browser, but that creates all sorts of privacy concerns. What appeals to me the most about Yuify at this point is that I can consider replacing stock image websites to license my work. It's possible that I could have more control over licensing terms and keep more of my earnings. Although stock image agencies are more hands-on when it comes to protecting your work and enforcing licensing agreements. So if I licensed my work strictly through Yuify, I would probably have to handle more customer service and perhaps get involved in some litigation if there are issues with my Yuify license being violated. That's not to mention that stock image websites make it easy to find images. If I were relying entirely on Yuify licensing, I'd have to find a way to make my images more easily discovered by buyers. Perhaps image search will be one of those paid features Wacom alluded to. I'm also intrigued by the idea that digitally signing my work will incentivize buyers to purchase prints from me because I have a record of being the true owner. I also like that the records will prove that my work was handmade and not AI generated. I could easily create a public link to my Yuify credentials for each piece and link it to the artwork on my website. Let's say all of my concerns are alleviated and Yuify becomes the perfect way to protect my art. Another potential downside is that Wacom's Yuify is proprietary. Will it be available forever? Definitely not. Will it be replaced with a different technology? Who knows? Adobe has their own content credentials which work similarly to Yuify. Might it get confusing which images are protected by which service? Possibly. Eventually, software becomes obsolete and support ends. In less than 100 years, your copyright will expire anyway, but Yuify may at least protect your work for the coming decades. So I think I'm going to play with Yuify a little and see where it goes, but I'd need the software to evolve more and for more unknowns to be answered before I dedicate too much effort into putting my work on the platform. That's all for this video. I hope this makes it more clear what Yuify can do to protect and monetize your art. If you appreciate this video, become a member, make a one-time donation, or support my work by purchasing some of my digital art products available on my website at aaronrutten.com. Heck, you could even license this painting. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.